want to talk about the things that we are not talking about. I want to talk about jealousy and loneliness and fear and making really horrible, embarrassing mistakes. And I also want to talk at a societal level about the things we have trouble talking about, like sexuality, racism, death and dying, and mental illness. And all these subjects have an emotional charge. And the name of that emotional charge is shame. Shame is the feeling that there is something about me that is so bad that it really makes me unlovable. And if you knew it about me, you would not want to be connected to me anymore. And some would say that that is the worst feeling that there is. So shame makes us want to hide. It makes us go silent, and it makes us isolate. And so why do I want to talk about this subject? Most normal people avoid these topics. And I want to talk about them because the opposite is also true. Basically, what you hide, what you don't talk about, begins to feel shameful. It begins to feel like something about it must be bad. Something about me must be bad. So I want to tell you a little story about that. I grew up in a pretty WASP family, pretty formal. And there was no puberty talk, like nothing, not one mention. And so, you know, like my body's changing, my feelings are changing, and I was living in this twilight zone of complete silence, and it felt so bizarre. And so it basically made me want to go into the closet because it just felt like something about this must be wrong. And for me, like telling my mom I wanted to go to a dance in 8th grade felt like I was sort of coming out of the closet as a straight person. So as you can see, the closet is really pretty dark inside. And what that means is you can't see the issue very clearly anymore. And you start to feel like it. You get sort of a distorted perspective, like there is something wrong with it. And also when you peer out that thin little crack of light, everybody else out there just looks so normal and so happy, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, I'm the only one like this, you know, and it's really scary. So when I went to medical school and I was trying to figure out, you know, what I wanted to do with my life, I felt like helping people out of their closets, because there's thousands of closets, all different shapes and names of closets, was something I really wanted to do. So I became a psychiatrist because I wanted to become an expert in awkward subjects. And I had this vision that I wanted my office to be like a porch, which is kind of the opposite of a closet. I felt like the porch is a place where you welcome people, where you say, hi, so good to see you, come in, take your shoes off, come sit beside me, tell me your story. And I just love that image. And what I have to say is that in my work, I have found that shame is actually at the heart of everything I do. So depression is really this horrible feeling of unworthiness and unlovability. Addiction is this, like I have to anesthetize this horrible feeling about myself of being bad. That's what I have to get away from. Suicide is the feeling of, you know, there's something so hopelessly defective about me that there's really no hope. Even trauma is the feeling of, you know, what's wrong with me that I couldn't have prevented this? What's wrong with me that I couldn't stop it? And now that it's happened to me, there's this horrible feeling like I'm damaged goods. Most families with someone with mental illness will tell you that the stigma of the mental illness is almost as bad, if not worse, than the mental illness itself. So what I started feeling in my work and my practice is that shame and stigma are a lethal public health threat. And that's because suicide is now one of the top 10 causes of death in our society. So I decided I need a public health intervention. I'm seeing one by one, you know, a few number of people in my office every day, and this is a huge problem. I need something bigger. What can I do that's a public health solution? And so I started just studying everything I could about shame, just reading and reading about it. And the first thing I know about shame is actually just from my clinical experience, which is that if someone in my office starts covering their face and they start looking down, then I know they're feeling shame. And then I actually know it's hopeful, like the therapy is going exactly where we want it to go. So I know that shame is about feeling visually exposed. It's like feeling like my badness is being witnessed. So I wanted a public health intervention that would reduce visual exposure. And the second thing I knew is that when people tell me their story, when they finally say this thing that they've never told anyone, it's really freeing. And there's a lot of research that actually backs this up. Jamie Pennebaker at the University of Texas in Austin has studied that when we have stories that we hide, our health suffers. And when we begin to tell those stories, in measurable ways, our health improves. There's less need for ER visits. There's quicker wound healing. Our immune system function is improved. And that sort of makes sense intuitively, right? Like telling stories, those kind of silent stories makes you feel better. But here's the really exciting thing. Thomas Houston at the University of Massachusetts, he has found that listening to stories can actually also improve your health. When people listen to stories of people who feel like them, they connect with a similar struggle, their blood pressure actually drops up to 11 points and lasts for months. They can measure it. So those are the two things I had to combine. It had to be minimizing visual exposure and about telling stories. And I decided that radio was the perfect way to do that. So as you heard, in 2008, I started Safe Space Radio. And we've done now over 225 interviews with courageous truth tellers who are willing to share their story. And radio is partly good because it's such a private medium. Mostly people listen to the radio alone, when you're driving, when you're alone, when you're cooking, when you're cleaning, and the guest also isn't seen, so the visual exposure is really reduced. So 225 interviews later, first we started with kind of mental illness topics, because that was the subject I felt kind of most confident doing, but now we've branched out. Right now we're in the midst of doing a series on racism that was inspired by the events at Ferguson. And if you want to hear those, please go to our website, safespaceradio.com. All of our prior shows are on the web. So I feel very lucky. I've been able to talk to 225 people telling these incredibly vulnerable stories, and I've been so inspired by their courage. And I've learned that voluntary vulnerability, coming forward with a story like this, is always an act of courage. But when I ask my guests, like, why are you telling this? What is it that enabled you to have the courage to do this, to share this? Basically, they all say the same thing, which is, if telling my story would help one other person who also struggles with it, then I really want to offer that story. So voluntary vulnerability is also an act of generosity. But here's the third part, the part that's really thrilling too, is that telling those stories begins to change the culture. Once one person comes forward with a story that no one else is talking about, but a lot of other people are feeling, it's like it opens the door and other people can begin coming out and it begins to affect the whole culture. So let me show you how that happens. So shame starts from the outside. It's like we get these messages like, you are bad. And no matter how old you are, it makes us feel small inside, just like this little child. You can't look up. And then what happens is that that shame moves from the outside in and it becomes internal. And we start fearing that it's true. We start believing like, oh my God, maybe this is bad about me. And this is the place where people suffer the most and where people are most at risk. But hopefully it doesn't stop here and people seek healing in one way or another, whether with a therapist or with a trusted friend, someone who is compassionate, who can listen and accept them. But finding that right person to talk to can often feel really challenging and difficult. Like, sort of, how do you navigate that? And so I love this image of the labyrinth because I feel like in some ways it's like at every choice point where you don't know which way to turn, the path of choosing the story that you don't want to talk about, the thing that you feel most embarrassed about, is almost always going to be a trustworthy guide out of that maze, like a trail of crumbs that will lead you out. So after you've done that sort of inner work of healing, there is another step, which is that you can share it with someone that you love, someone that you're close to, your best friend, your family, your partner. And so this is what individual healing looks like. And I would say this is the path. The shame comes from out, it comes inside. We work on it internally, and then we bring it out to the people that we love. And that's individual healing, and this is very, very good. But I wanted to take it one step further. I wanted to take it out into a public health solution so that we don't waste that wound. We use it to help other people out. So for me, that public health venture is public telling through the radio. And other people do it through starting nonprofits that work on the issue that they've struggled with. So many people are doing this. For me, the microphone is like a talking stick. It's like something that helps you drop down into that most heartfelt place inside where you can tell a story that is so personal. Because when we are in that place, what is most personal is most universal. And we can begin to connect with each other, no matter how different we seem on the outside. And when lots of people do this, it begins to affect the larger culture. So as you all know, for decades, right, gay and lesbian people have been coming out of the closet, affirming who they are. And as they've done that, now we see that that cultural change has led to a political change. And one by one, like dominoes across this country, state after state, are approving marriage equality. So we see that this couple, they've been together for 72 years. They were just able to get married in Iowa. So just to complete the circle then, when we come out and we tell our stories and we affirm who we are, it begins to feed back right to those sources of external shame and to minimize the cycle of shame in general. So another way of saying this is that shame is at the heart of our psychological wounds, and if we can tend it, it can become the heart of our psychological healing. And when we bring it out to the surface to share it, it's not only the heart of our psychological healing, but becomes part of social change. So I see shame as the intersection of psychological healing and social change. I see it as a political force. When we are silenced and isolated, we can't come together to work effectively. If you think about the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the gay rights movement, they all have to do with letting go of shame and coming forward and affirming yourself. I see it as an unstoppable force of nonviolent social change. So, in keeping with that, I feel like I want to share a story of my own shame with you, and it's a story about jealousy. I think of jealousy as kind of like shame squared. It's like when you're jealous of someone, right, they already have something that you don't have, or they were able to be a certain way and you can't be that way, so you already feel kind of like small in relation to them. It's a horrible feeling. And then on top of it, you feel jealous, which makes you feel like even smaller, and just like, it's an awful feeling, small twice. And so the biggest feeling that you have, or certainly that I have when I feel jealous, is I want to go right back into that horrible closet that we talked about. And of course, when I'm in there, it feels like I'm the only one who ever felt this way, and like nobody else felt it, which is terrible. So you can imagine my surprise many years ago when a dear friend of mine, Mary Ann, came up to me and she said, "Ann, I've just been struggling so much with feeling jealous of you." And I was like, what? Like, I could not believe her courage that she could tell me that. And I was like, Mary Ann, how did you have the guts to tell me? Weren't you afraid that I'd feel like I had power over you? And she said, "Oh no, Ann, when I was hiding it, you did. But now that I've told it," she's like, "I just got my power back. I've freed myself." So I was like, is that true? Like, is that true? Or does that just sound nice? Like, just wasn't totally sure I could really trust that. So enter my younger sister, Mary. My younger sister is a Rhodes Scholar. She's very successful. She has a lot more money than I do. And on top of all of that, she's like this lovely person. She's generous, she's trustworthy, thoughtful. So she's an easy person to feel jealous of, and it's hard to feel outshone by your younger sister. But I was thinking I was managing it okay. I was sort of like hiding my jealousy. God forbid I actually show it to her. I was kind of hiding it from myself, actually, until the day I got married. And on the day of your wedding, you want to shine on your wedding day. So a week after, I'm alone in the kitchen with my mother, and my mother says to me, "Oh, Ann, on your wedding day, everyone was saying how beautiful Mary was." I was like, "What?" She's like, "Everyone was saying that Mary should be a model." And I burst into tears. And that was not voluntary vulnerability. That just felt like raw exposure. It felt horrible. So I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do something about this. And at first, my first strategy was actually to hide it more, like, this is not affecting me at all. And then leading up to our next family vacation, Thanksgiving, I noticed that I was like trying to eat less and like just get a little bit thinner right before Thanksgiving, or like look prettier. And I thought, this is nuts. This is crazy. I'm not going down this path. So I thought, this is time to put my friend Mary Ann's theory to the test. So the first night of Thanksgiving vacation, I'm upstairs in the bathroom with Mary. We're brushing our teeth in our nightgowns, And I just confessed it all to her. I just said, Mary, I've been feeling jealous. Mom said you were so beautiful on my wedding day, and you're so amazing. It's so hard. And I don't want to feel jealous of you. I don't want it to come between us. I want to be close to you. So I was so terrified that I cannot remember what happened next. I have no idea what she responded. I actually called her to get her permission to talk about this. And she couldn't remember how she responded either. So there's no like perfect end to the story. But I can tell you that it really changed my relationship with her, that she and I have become so much closer. It was the beginning of trust. So the internal healing here is realizing that jealousy was actually not my relationship with Mary, it was my relationship with myself, with the vulnerability in me that I was judging as weak and not good enough. And the external healing was sharing it with her. She and I have now become trusting and close. We were able to weather the death of my father together without any conflict, and dividing up his possessions without any conflict. So this is not a grandiose story of cultural change in some large, big way, but in my family, the anxiety went down. I'm part of a lot of siblings, and everyone could feel that she and I were closer, and I think it was a gift to all of us. So why am I telling you this? I'm not telling you because I want you to run out and go confess your jealousy to everyone necessarily. That may not be what's right for you. But I am telling you because hiding is much less safe than you think, much less safe than it appears. And even though I changed my mind about 6 times, whether I had the courage to tell you a story about jealousy, I was like, I cannot believe I'm going to talk to them about that. I finally decided I would share my jealousy with you because I truly believe that making myself vulnerable is the greatest gift that I have to offer. So take a moment now and just imagine for a minute, what is your story that you are hiding? What is the story that you're afraid if you shared it would change how people think of you, that they would judge you? And just for a moment, imagine what it would be like if that story was actually one of the greatest gifts you had to offer someone else who suffers alone. Because voluntary vulnerability is not only an act of generosity and courage, it's an act of cultural leadership. Thank you very much.